And of course it's...
Hold on, talking to a famous person who just said...
Now, but...
Okay, who just said he wants to talk to me. He's like, hold on, I'll talk to you in a second.
And, I sympathize a lot with my mother. I know earlier on it's harsher, but I've learned more about the history, so I won't go into that now. But I couldn't understand why she would fight almost to the death. Like, narcissists will fight criticism like you're pushing them off a cliff. You know, like if somebody was trying to... I remember being in Florida Falls when I was 6, visiting my father. This is
like a blistering winter, like a train with no wings. Oh, this guy's famous. And he just said, I'll talk to you in a moment, Hilton. I'll talk to you in a moment. Thank you.
Have a teenager. Any hypocrisies that you have will be criticized. I don't understand why being criticized is so appalling that you would scream or any responsibility that you would scream and yell and so on. And I remember with another narcissist when I was younger, seeing the incendiary self-hatred that's really at the root of all this stuff. And it's a vicious circle, right? Because they don't... Because
it's not fucking math.
They hate themselves. They have to go for status as a compensatory mechanism. But the more they go for status, the more they hate themselves. And this is the death spiral.
I have a question for Stefan.
I couldn't understand, like, why...
Because he asked something... He says... He, like, talks about narcissism like it's real. I'm not sure narcissism is real.
I mean, was it a couple of months ago? So sort of shortly after I came
so
back.
I'll ask, are you sure that narcissism exists?
And I fought for about 20 minutes, and then I was
I'm
like...
going to ask Stefan here.
And I just said, yeah, sorry, everyone, I did something completely retarded mathematically, totally wrong.
He's famous too, but he also doesn't have...
in a more beneficial way.
He's like one of the people I'm best with that's not... That wouldn't blow me up, honestly.
My ego, right? So it took me just a long time to understand, like, why would narcissists fight? I wasn't even criticizing my mother. I was giving her sympathy, but saying, look, there's something you can do to manage this.
I'll say, good evening, Stefan.
Or she was fighting
good evening, Stefan.
Hard as if...
Are you sure narcissism exists?
I had pulled a weapon on her. You ever noticed that? I'm sure you have, right?
Wait,
with somebody who's like really self-absorbed and narcissistic or whatever.
You pulled a weapon on somebody.
You bring some level of responsibility, some criticism to them, and boom, it just gets kind of crazy, man. It just gets kind of crazy. And all right. For some reason, I see when I'm talking here. Yeah, and that's because you are getting to the root of the self-hatred. And if the self-hatred wins, they're going to die. I think that's kind of the way that it goes. Now, I'm not sure why am I getting this audio in my ear. Hang on a sec here. Why? I don't know why. Hang on a sec here, because I don't want to end up with this all this audio coming on my side.
Good evening, Stefan.
How you doing?
I wanted to ask you, are you sure narcissism exists?
What do you mean by exists?
Well, you're saying your mom was a narcissist. I see most everybody as a narcissist. So I'm asking in what sense?
Okay, so you're asking me, is it human nature? Does it exist? And in what sense does it exist? Those are all kind of contradictory things, I think. So you're going to have to help me out. I mean this with humility. Help me to understand what it is that you would like to focus on.
Yes, sir. So if we're talking about narcissism, meaning you love yourself, let's say, what do you define narcissism as? I say you love yourself more than anybody else, right?
No, I wouldn't say love is involved with narcissism at all. Narcissism is when the only sense of self you get is out of being superior to others, dominating others, or manipulating others, that there's no actual connection, there's no exchange of values, there's no exchange of virtues. It is when the only pleasure that you get in life is out of either dominating people directly or serving those who dominate and getting the table scraps from their domination.
That's very interesting. I've seen
Lose. Sorry, go ahead.
no. That's very interesting, and I've seen moments in people like that, and I've seen moments in myself like that. I'm not sure that it exists psychologically. It's something that therapists should be diagnosing people as.
Okay, I'm not sure what to do with that. What do you mean by okay? What does exist psychologically? And again, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm genuinely curious what your thinking is here. So, what does exist psychologically for you? Like, are there dysfunctions that do exist of which narcissism is not one, or is there something else?
Okay, so if we're taking narcissism as in you're trying to put people down, that's what I would think that you think it is.
It's a win-lose situation. So, if you are a narcissist, then you have to get your way, or the other person is going to dominate you, and you're never going to get your way. So the only way that you can get your way is to bribe, bully, or threaten or something like that to get your way, because there's no such thing as a win-win, because it's you or the other person. It's predatory. It's like a lion and a zebra, right? If the lion wins, the zebra dies. If the zebra wins and gets away, the lion may be injured or weakened, or and if the zebras keep getting away, then the lion dies. So it's win-lose. It's sort of very primitive. It is like if you capture the slave is your slave. You can't trade with them. It can't be win-win, as in a free market or something like that. So a narcissist is someone to whom the only way that they can win is if somebody else has to lose, and you don't want to be the person who loses, so you have to dominate and get what you want.
Correct. I see that playing out a lot. Even now, I mean, I could see you wanting to be the predator of me, or me wanting to be the predator of you in this interaction, or in any Twitter interaction.
Hang on, a little surprising to me. So, in what way do you see me as wanting to be the predator in this interaction?
In any Twitter interaction, I see this, and I would say that you are the best. You are one of the best at it.
Don't move the goalpost. Don't move the goalpost. I'm asking you.
Okay.
I'm not trying to catch you out. I'm just trying to understand. So you said in this interaction, I'm trying to win by having you lose. I'm being predatory in this interaction. So rather than skip to Twitter, which we can't verify because we can know what we were talking about in this interaction. So tell me what you mean about this interaction.
Yes. So I would see you as one of the least narcissistic people on Twitter, and other people being worse at this.
Stay on this interaction.
No, I'm saying you're.
I'm predatory in this interaction. So again, I'm not trying to be confrontational.
Yeah,
I just want
yeah.
to understand what you mean.
Correct. And I'm saying that you are actually not this on Twitter. I won't even say the word Twitter again. The reason why is because it seems like this is a social dynamic where there has to be a percentage of narcissism. Does that make sense?
What is a social dynamic? You mean your conversation?
Yes, but it's a very small percentage. I would say it's a percentage of any interaction that you have ever. But especially on Twitter, that's why I was saying that.
So are you saying, okay, what percentage of our interaction do you think is predatory?
Probably 5%. It's very little.
Okay.
But there's many where it's a lot greater, and it's very often to the point where I would say that narcissism is in every person, and it doesn't exist, really.
So narcissism is in every person, but it doesn't exist. So we have 5% of something in our interaction that doesn't exist. You understand that's a little confusing, right?
Well, but to the point where I would discount it. That's what I should say.
So it does exist, but in small amounts.
To the point where is there anything that you would discount like that?
Don't ask me. I'm trying to follow your thinking. Again, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I just want to understand. Okay, so let's back up a second and tell me what you mean by the word exists, right? I think we can agree that a rock exists and a tree exists and so on, right? So those things exist, independent of consciousness and so on. Let me ask you this. Do mindsets such as happiness or sadness or love, the sort of objective excitement and so on, do they exist?
This is a great question. And I'm saying those ones you wouldn't discount because they're so significant. I'm saying this is so insignificant that it could be discounted psychologically.
I'm sorry. Now I'm trying to understand what you mean by the word exists. Okay, let me ask you this. So if you think that I'm one of the less or the least narcissistic people around, which I appreciate, what would you say the average interaction, let's say on Twitter, we can go back there. So the average interaction on Twitter, would you consider it largely win-lose or aiming for win-win?
It's people trying to preserve their ego.
So it's win-lose.
And I don't see that in you.
Okay, so that's win-lose, right?
Win-lose from their perspective, yes. Not from mine.
No, I get it. You're observing, right? I mean, we can be biologists and observe a predator-prey relationship and say it's win-lose, right? Okay, so what percentage of interactions on Twitter would you say are win-lose? I suppose all of them, but what would be the average percentage of win-lose? You say with you and I it's 5%. What would it be on X in your experience?
If I'm interacting with somebody,
No, just watching other people interact.
okay, even watching other people interact, I would say above 51%.
I'm sorry, it's about what?
It's above 51%. So they're mostly
51%, okay.
right. So they're mostly trying to preserve their ego, and then 49% not.
Yeah, I mean, how often, and this is a question for everyone here, and I appreciate this conversation, it's very interesting. So, how often do you see people on X say, you know what, you're totally right, you have better data, you have better arguments, I concede the point, thank you for the instruction?
0.00, you know what I mean?
Okay, so then mostly it's win-lose, right?
Correct.
So it's much more than 51% if only 0.0001% or whatever is people
If
actually getting to the truth and having a productive discussion.
if it's that type of conversation, because I follow a lot of people who make jokes. You know what I mean?
I mean, generally, okay, so 0.001% or whatever, so it's a tiny proportion, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000 interactions on X. So if it is the vast majority of interactions, at least that you see on a place like X, and it's, say, it's 5% with us, but it's 99.99% with a lot of people on X, then doesn't it exist, and isn't it kind of the default position for humanity to have win-lose, I dominate, you subjugate, or you subjugate, and then I avoid? And I mean, you've heard me a million times on this show, if you've listened to it much. I ask sort of people simple questions, and they just kind of dodge or gaslight or won't answer and all that kind of stuff. And that's because they don't want to admit a lack of knowledge. They don't want to admit a lack of certainty. And it certainly has been my experience that and I'm not talking about you, and even indirectly, but when the stronger that people come along, like the more they say, Steph, you're just wrong, right? Then the less chance they have to back down because they've come across very aggressively, which means that they're in a win-lose paradigm, and therefore they're never going to admit false, right? Because that would be to lose, and that would asking a selfish person or a narcissist to admit fault is like trying to lecture, if you could, a zebra to give up his intestines to the lion, right? It's not going to do it. It's not because it's win-lose. So again, I'm a little bit confused if you say it's the vast majority of interactions on X, but it doesn't really exist.
Correct. And I'm seeing why you're saying that. I'm saying, why should any psychologist be diagnosing a person as a narcissist? That's my issue. It's not necessarily us using it colloquially.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's this being a condition, a condition that's diagnosed.
Okay, so what's wrong with that? What's wrong with
Because again, it's not going to be something that any person could be more than 95% of the time, in my opinion.
Sorry, say that again?
Or thank you for asking that. Thank you. Because it's actually not something anybody could be more than 5% of the time, is what I meant to say.
So you're saying that because everybody is narcissistic to some degree, it's an invalid diagnosis?
Correct. This is my point.
Okay, but wouldn't you say that degrees matter?
Yes, but to the degree that I would see that, it would have to be more than 20%. It would have to be a lot, and I have not seen that in any person.
You've not seen more than, but you see it 99.99% on X, but you don't see it more than 20% among individuals?
I see it as a trait, 99.9% of the time on X, sure, but not as a trait of a person more than maybe 5% of the time.
Okay, so you're saying that 95% of the time people in real life are empathetic and curious and working towards win-win solutions and are not putting each other down or escalating or being aggressive or anything like that.
Correct. This is what I see.
Well, I'd love to live on the planet where you live. let me ask you this, and I doubt it.
I guess so.
Your experience and all of that, but let me just go back to what percentage, right? What percentage of, and I'm not talking like in my family life, we do all of this stuff. So he's saying that in outside of close, my marriage, my close personal friends, my family, we're looking for win-win, and I really can't remember the last time that it's been escalation or win-lose or anything like that. So if you are in a situation, do you mean this in your personal life, or do you mean this in things that you observe in the world as a whole? Because if you see it vastly more on X, so somewhere in between, like if you work in a large organization, there's couple of people you're probably loyal to and you work to help each other, but there's a lot of people who are kind of win-lose, and some things are win-lose. Like if you're up for a promotion, you get the promotion, nobody else does. Somebody else gets the promotion and you don't. So that's kind of win-lose in and of itself. So are you saying that, and again, I know this is confrontational, I don't mean that at all, but are you trying to say that in the world that you live in, not just your own personal relationships, that you see no more than 20% of win-lose?
I see it to that extent where I believe that it could be impossible for any person to not be narcissistic.
You see it to the degree that you would consider it impossible for any person to not be narcissistic.
So it's a mute point.
Actually, you got to break it. That's too many negatives and it's a bit too convoluted. Can you state it to me? Put me in the high chair and pretend that I'm like 5 years old and you're explaining it.
Yes. So if every single person is something, then I would say it's not to be a diagnosable condition because every single person is this.
No, but every person has to have the capacity for that. So I approach, as you may have heard or may not have heard, I approach everyone, and I have since I was 20 so hang on. So I did a year and a half working up north, I had 2 years of English literature, almost 2 years of theater school, and then so I was in my early 20s when I met my roommate, who's a totally brilliant guy, was actually still in touch, and he had like 2 PhDs eventually, and he taught me this game theory thing, which is treat people the best you can the first time that you meet them, and after that, treat them as they treat you. So I treat people very well, and if someone comes at me hard and is in a win-lose mindset, then I will certainly try to turn it around. If they won't turn it around and they keep coming at me, then I will switch into win-lose mindset.
Right. And I think you're smarter than...
If you're play fighting with someone and they start punching you, right? You're just supposed to be sort of play wrestling and they start punching you and they won't let you get away, don't you? You have to start punching back, right?
Well, you're smarter than most therapists, as am I, which is why I'm saying I don't believe it exists. I think it's,
hang on.
You know what I'm saying?
We're not having a conversation, right? You're just saying the same thing. So, and I'm sorry if I was unclear. So what I'm saying is that we all have to have the capacity to be selfish because we sometimes have to deal with selfish people. So I want even in this conversation, I want it to be a win-win conversation. In other words, you and I both get closer to the truth, as does the audience, which is great. But in situations where, like there was this guy, John Balfour, is a professor who called up and is very hostile towards me. And he was just throwing a bunch of ad hominems and so on. So eventually I just got impatient and was fairly abrupt and direct with him about the need to stop doing that and, hopefully have a more productive conversation. So, and if people, he wasn't that case, but if people continue to be rude, I'll just be rude back. Because we need to have that capacity when we're in a win-lose situation. We need to have the capacity to win. Otherwise, we're just feeding the bullies, right? And so if you say, well, people are sometimes, quote, narcissistic or in the win-lose mindset, well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in order for the economic system to not collapse, some people are going to have to lose, right? So we're going to have to stop giving money to all over the planet. We're going to have to stop funding all of the people who are irresponsible with their lives and have too many kids without fathers or don't save. Some people are going to have to lose. And it's unfortunate because we'd love to stay in a win-win paradigm, but we can't, because when the people who are receiving tax money win, the taxpayer loses. And when the taxpayer gets to keep more of his money, the people who are receiving his money through the power of the state, they lose. So it's great to have a win-win negotiation with people, but when you're in a win-lose situation, you need to adapt to that and recognize that you are in a win-lose situation and work your best not to lose. In other words, empathy is great when other people have empathy. When other people don't have empathy, then you can't have empathy for them because they will just exploit you.
So to reverse your question, does everybody have to be a little narcissistic?
Sorry, I just had the speech. Tell me what you got out of my speech, because I'm not sure if I'm communicating well.
Oh, that was the first question. And the other question was going to be...
Okay, what was my question just now?
You asked... That was my first question, I said. You didn't ask a question, did you?
So I just answered the question about why I think win-lose mindset and shutting off empathy is essential. And then you said, well, isn't everybody a little narcissistic? So I wasn't
Right.
sure if you understood what it is that I was saying, because I say that 2 and 2 make 4, and then you say, well, what did 2 and 2 make? And I said, well, I just answered that, and you may not agree with
Well,
that.
I'm trying to get you to agree with it.
The question as if I hadn't said it.
I was trying to get you to agree with it, with what you just said, because it would help my argument.
No. So I'm not a little narcissistic with my wife. I'm not a little narcissistic with my friends, James, of course, and Jared, if you're around, and other people who know me. I think you would agree, and certainly tell me if you don't. So I am generous and kind-hearted and empathetic and win-win with the people who are mature and also have that mindset. But with other people, I'm not.
Right. So narcissism is a trait.
It's not like I'm a little narcissistic. I am narcissistic. Well, I shouldn't say. I adapt to the win. I'm not narcissistic because it's not a habit. It's not my general approach to life, and it's not my first approach to life. But it's kind of like saying, should you be violent? It's like, well, no, you shouldn't be violent unless someone's being violent towards you, and then you might need violence in order to protect yourself. But you're not the initiator of violence. So if somebody starts to put me into a win-lose paradigm and I can't just get out of the situation, then I will switch to, and it's very confusing to people. This is a bit of a British thing. Oh, you're so nice, you're so nice. Moral people are really nice until they're not. And then everyone gets all shocked and surprised because they thought they'd be able to hammer the empathy button, but the moral people get whatever they wanted. So, and I've had this, of course, over the course of my social career, that people have gone at me hard, and I have worked sometimes in front of the scenes, sometimes behind the scenes to get them back. And I have no problem with that. I think it's actually quite healthy, and it's good. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. So it's not like everybody has to be a little narcissistic. It's that you don't want to be defenseless if you're against a predator. You have to have that predator within you when faced with a predator yourself. Otherwise, you just roll over and get ripped apart.
Well, there's two things there. And as an ANCAP myself, I see that violence comparison is actually very good. But would you say that every person has to be depressed?
I'm not sure what that question means.
Because you said that every person has to be slightly violent to meet the end of their mean.
No, it's not like everybody. I don't go through the day and say, okay, I'm only going to be violent for half an hour a day, right? But when faced with aggression that you cannot evade, you have to have the capacity to be aggressive in return.
This is my problem with the violence thing, is that you are not initiating it. I wouldn't consider that violence.
Okay, so it's not narcissism to switch into a win-lose paradigm if somebody is trapping you in a win-lose situation.
Correct.
So in general, I won't say to someone, calm your tits. right? But if somebody keeps sort of speaking over me when I'm in a debate, I'm going to tell them to calm the fuck down. Right?
Correct.
So I will get verbally assertive, if not downright aggressive, if the person just keeps kind of putting me down, kind of being snarky and talking over me. I have to shoulder the person aside so that I can assert my space within the debate. Otherwise, what do? Just put my pacifier in my mouth and stare at the camera until, half an hour has passed. And right, so when I don't understand something, I have to sort of quote interrupt them. So I don't consider that to be aggressive. When people are rude to you, it's not rudeness to be aggressive back. It is simply a response to the initiation of rudeness, right? Like, I mean,
Correct.
I'm not start yelling at you and telling you to calm your tits in this debate because, this conversation, because you're not being rude or anything. But so it's not like we just have to have the capacity. Well, we have to have the capacity to be assertive in the face of aggression, to be aggressive back in the face of aggression. And the people who don't want to do that are just people who want to roll over. It's not moral to be weak. You have to have the capacity for aggression in order to have the virtue called self-restraint. Like, so for instance, like Joe Rogan is an expert at martial arts, right? So I would never go up into a physical fight with Joe Rogan, right? Because he would clearly kick my ass, right? I mean, I work out, but I'm not an expert in hand-to-hand combat in that kind of way. So for me, I don't sit there and say, well, I have so much self-restraint, you see, because I just choose not to kick Joe Rogan's ass, right? I have all this stuff because then people would look at me and they'd laugh because it's like Joe Rogan has been doing martial arts for like decades and I haven't, right? So it's not a particular virtue called self-restraint that has me not, if the opportunity arose, rush into some fight with Joe Rogan or something like that, right? Or if I said, well, I would choose not to beat Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime in weightlifting. I would choose to, no, I couldn't beat him in that, right? Well, I got all of these phone calls from a desperate Brian May saying, Steph, we really need you to replace Freddie Mercury. It's like, no, but I can't sing even a billionth that well, right? So in order to have the virtue, you have to have the capacity to do it. And so if you have a virtue called self-restraint, that virtue requires that you be able to act in a non-self-restrained fashion, right? So in order to say, well, I'm going to withhold my aggression or focus my aggression, you have to have the capacity for aggression. And this is why we look at somebody who's like a martial artist, right? And they get provoked in the subway and they walk away. And we say, that's really impressive because that martial artist could kick those guys' asses, but he chooses to walk away. Whereas, some skinny kid with this 4 big burly guys and some skinny kid chooses to walk away, we say, well, that's wise. But we wouldn't say he could have kicked their asses, but he chooses not to. So I think that the real nobility is having the capacity for aggression or perhaps even violence and choosing not to use it. And so, but I wouldn't say that means everybody has to be a little bit violent, but you have to have the capacity for significant aggression in order to call yourself virtuous for having self-restraint.
Well, that is nobility. That is, and I don't deny that nobility exists, but there, as you know, there are people who walk around with that narcissism trait. And
the narcissism trait, didn't you say narcissism doesn't exist? I'm still a little confused about this.
Well, we have to break it down. It would be a narcissism trait that everybody has. That's why I'm saying it's not a condition that a therapist should be diagnosing anybody as. And if you're saying, I think the violence is a great comparison because it's you're saying they have to have a capacity for it.
It's like anger. So anger, anybody can get angry, right? We I'm sure this audience and people who listen to this, we've all been in situations where somebody's getting angry and they're just wrong. They're just wrong. They're ridiculous. They're taking it the wrong way. They're hypersensitive. They're petty. They're immature. They're just getting angry and yelling at stupid things, right? So getting angry is not a virtue. But we've also seen other people who are being roundly mistreated and abused and, in that sort of, what was his name? Crispin Glover was the actor in the original Back to the Future, who was just getting pushed around all the time and so on, right? So an excess of anger is it's a vice, it's a fault. A deficiency of anger is also a fault and a vice. Because everyone can say, well, I choose not to get angry and that makes me superior, right? And this is the Erica Kirk thing that I was criticizing from, what was it today, 3 months ago, that poor Charlie was shot through the neck. So I'm not sure why you'd be laughing at that.
I was laughing at Erica Kirk.
Yeah, well, I know, I didn't get funny either because I think she took the entire energy out of the movement with this very self-conscious and self-praising. I forgive. It's terrible. It's terrible. This is why having women run this stuff emotionally is generally not a very productive plan in the long run. But so an excess of anger is a sin and a fault. A deficiency of anger is a sin and a fault. So getting angry at the right time, in the right way, with a positive outcome is not easy at all. And so, everybody has to have the capacity to be angry, but you also have to know how to do it in the right way. Everybody has to have the capacity for aggression, but you have to know to do it in the right way.
And I see what you're saying.
That you wanted to mention, and we've got another couple of callers who want in.
Yeah, I'll let you go in a second. I see why you would bring up anger. I just don't see narcissism as a trait being possible to affect a person to the degree that anger does, to where it would be diagnosable.
Well, if somebody approaches every interaction from a highly aggressive, dominant, abusive win-lose, then that would be like somebody who's a hardened criminal, as opposed to somebody using self-defense. So if you are continually initiating aggression, which would be narcissism, to dominate, to get what you want that way, or to manipulate if you're physically weaker and older and so on. So I think that you can diagnose these things, because otherwise it's saying, well, everyone has the capacity for violence, therefore there's no difference between somebody throwing punches and somebody throwing punches back. And so I think you would look at each individual situation. But if somebody has the general approach, the violence, therefore there's no difference between somebody throwing punches and somebody throwing punches back.
Okay, he just hung up on me.
And so I think
I was going to say,
individual situation. But if somebody has the general approach,
whatever.
the habitual approach, the default